Have you ever noticed how some people seem to navigate life with a quiet grace, even as the years add up? There's a certain wisdom they carry. Not the kind that comes from books or degrees, but from living deliberately, from paying attention to what matters. It's that kind of wisdom that feels increasingly rare in our world of constant noise and distraction. You might be wondering, what separates these individuals from everyone else? What do they know that others don't? What habits have they cultivated or abandoned along the way? The truth is, wisdom isn't always about what you do. Sometimes it's about what you consciously choose not to do anymore. Today, we're going to explore the habits that intelligent, emotionally mature people leave behind as they grow older. These aren't just random choices. They're deliberate decisions that create space for deeper living, for more authentic connections, and for the kind of peace that doesn't depend on perfect circumstances. I believe the last one will leave you, and quite surprised, whether you're recently retired, approaching your golden years, or simply seeking to live with more intention regardless of your age. What you'll discover today might change how you approach your daily life. You'll learn practical ways to let go of what no longer serves you and embrace what truly matters in this season of life. But before we dive into specifics, I want you to consider something. What if the secret to aging well isn't about adding more to your life, more activities, more possessions, more achievements? What if it's actually about subtraction? About carefully removing what drains your energy, clouds your judgment, or keeps you trapped in patterns that no longer fit who you've become. The wisdom of maturity comes from knowing what deserves your precious time and attention and what doesn't. It comes from understanding that every no to something unnecessary is a yes to something essential. And it comes from recognizing that some habits, even ones that might have served you well in earlier chapters, may now be standing between you and your most fulfilled self. Nothing explains this better than the story I'm about to tell you. It's a crisp Thursday morning by the lake. The trees bend lightly under the breeze, and the water reflects a soft morning sky. On an old bench facing the shoreline sit three friends, Walter, Clara, and Frank. Walter, now in his 70s, pours hot coffee from his thermos, filling 3 small cups with practiced ease. The steam rises and mingles with the morning air as he passes them around. Clara accepts hers with a smile, wrapping her hands around the warmth. She's been a widow for 5 years now, but there's a quiet strength about her that Walter has always admired. Her silver hair catches the sunlight as she takes a small sip, her eyes never leaving the gentle movement of the water. We're here to share life lessons worth remembering. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next one. Continuing, Frank, the newest addition to their Thursday ritual, sits a bit more stiffly on the edge of the bench. He's only been retired for 3 months, after nearly 4 decades as a mail carrier. The adjustment hasn't been easy. You can see it in how he holds himself, like a man still waiting for something to happen, still living by the clock even. When the clock no longer dictates his days, they sit in comfortable silence for a while, watching the ducks glide across the surface of the lake. It's Frank who finally breaks the quiet, his voice carrying an edge of uncertainty that betrays his outward calm. "What do you think makes someone truly wise?" he asks, not looking at either of them directly. "I thought retirement would bring some kind of, I don't know, clarity. But most days I feel like I know less than ever." Walter doesn't answer right away. He lets the question settle like mist over the water, taking another sip of his coffee. As a retired teacher, he's learned the value of sitting with a question before attempting an answer. He leans back against the bench, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he considers his response. "Let me tell you what I've come to understand," Walter says finally, his voice warm with reflection. "There are certain things intelligent people just don't do, not because they want to look wise, but because they've learned where peace lives." Frank turns toward him, interest piqued. Clara nods slightly, knowing Walter's way of distilling, complex truths into stories and observations. This is why they gather here each week, not just for company, but for the gentle wisdom that seems to emerge when they share the silence and then break it with honesty. First, Walter says, shifting slightly to face his friends, an intelligent person never pretends they're fine when they're not. He pauses, his gaze drifting momentarily to a point beyond the lake. I did that, he admits, smiled through grief. When I lost my brother, thought being strong meant hiding everything. But it was Clara who said one day, "You're not protecting anyone with silence. You're just building a wall you'll get stuck behind." Frank nods, recognition flickering across his face. "I've been doing that," he confesses quietly. Telling Olivia, "I'm adjusting fine, telling the kids I'm enjoying every minute. Truth is, some days I don't know who I am without my route, without my uniform. Feels foolish to admit that." "Not foolish," Clara says gently. "Human. There's a difference between privacy and pretending. One preserves your dignity, the other erodes it from within." Walter nods in agreement. "Second," he continues, "an intelligent person never dismisses the young too quickly." His eyes light up with the memory he's about to share. 2 years ago, after my knee surgery, they assigned me this physical therapist. Couldn't have been more than 30. Hair dyed purple at the tips, tattoo of a constellation on her wrist. He chuckles, shaking his head. I almost ignored her advice, thought, what could she know that I don't? But it was her patience, her listening, that taught me how to move again. She'd studied the latest techniques, approaches I'd never heard of. Wisdom doesn't always wear grey hair. Frank shifts uncomfortably. I may have been guilty of that, he admits. The young man who took over my route. I've been critical, maybe unfairly so. Clara smiles and adds her voice to the conversation. Third, an intelligent person never holds grudges that weigh down the heart. Her voice carries the gentle authority of someone who has learned this lesson well. I had a neighbor, Elaine, whom I avoided for years over a misunderstanding. About property lines. Such a small thing in retrospect, but I nursed that irritation, let it grow into something bigger than it deserved to be. She looks down at her hands, lined with years of experience, then back up at Frank. One day, I saw her struggling with groceries. Her arthritis was worse than mine. I helped her inside, and we ended up talking for hours. Forgiving her and myself felt like dropping a stone I'd been carrying without knowing it. Frank sighs, a heavy sound that seems to come from deep within. I've been putting off my checkup again, he admits, changing the subject but somehow staying within the rhythm of their shared reflections. Walter chuckles knowingly. Fourth, an intelligent person never neglects their health out of habit or fear. He gestures broadly at the lake, the trees, the sky above them. It's not about vanity or even longevity, though that's nice too. It's about gratitude for the legs that carry you, the breath in your chest, the eyes that let you see all this beauty. You don't wait until something breaks to start respecting it. Frank looks down at his hands, strong, capable hands that have sorted thousands of letters, opened countless mailboxes, weathered summers and winters on his route. For the first time, he notices the slight tremor in his right hand, something he's been ignoring for months. Clara folds her hands gently in her lap, the morning light catching on her wedding band, which she still wears. Fifth, they never say yes just to avoid discomfort. Her voice is soft but certain. For years after Robert died, I said yes to every request, every committee, every family obligation. I thought staying busy would keep grief at bay, and saying no felt selfish somehow. She looks directly at Frank now, but eventually I realized I was pouring from an empty cup. Boundaries, she says with quiet emphasis, are a form of kindness, first to yourself, then to everyone else. Frank frowns slightly, his brow furrowing as he absorbs her words. Sometimes, he admits, I replay things in my mind, routes I could have done better. Words I should have said to my kids when they were young. Opportunities I missed. His voice grows quieter. The things I didn't say to Olivia when we had that rough patch 20 years ago. Walter gives him a long, understanding look. Sixth, he says with the gentleness of someone who has walked this path, an intelligent person never dwells on regrets they cannot change. He leans forward slightly, making sure Frank hears him clearly. The past doesn't deserve your present. Guilt is only useful if it teaches, not if it chains you. A silence falls between them, broken only by the subtle lapping of water against the shore and the distant call of birds. Frank seems to be turning Walter's words over in his mind, testing their weight and truth against his own experience. After a while, he speaks again, his voice steadier now. I think I've been scared to try new things, like that part of life is over. He gestures vaguely. Olivia wants us to take a painting class. I told her I'd be terrible at it. Walter responds, with a smile that reaches his eyes. Seventh, an intelligent person never avoids new experiences out of fear. Life doesn't stop offering just because you stopped asking. Every day still has something to teach, if you're still willing to listen. The sun has climbed higher in the sky now, warming their faces. The early morning chill has given way to a pleasant warmth that seems to relax Frank's shoulders visibly. The birds move in a quiet rhythm across the lake, their reflections rippling in the gentle waves. Walter adds one last thought, his voice carrying the weight of years and the lightness of hard-won peace. And eighth, an intelligent person never tries to control what's meant to be let go. I spent years thinking I could fix everything, manage outcomes, plan the pain away. But peace only came when I stopped gripping so tight. Life isn't a problem to be solved. It's a tide to be trusted. The three of them sit in a long silence, not awkward, but full. Frank takes a deep breath, his shoulders visibly lighter than when he arrived. Clara stands and touches his arm gently. Same time next week? She asks. He nods, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He's not the same man who arrived on that bench an hour ago. Behind them, the lake glimmers, with quiet understanding, holding every word they said and all the ones they didn't need to. And as they gather their things to leave, there's a sense that something important has been exchanged, something more valuable than advice or platitudes. A kind of permission, perhaps, to grow older with intention, to set down what no longer serves, and to embrace what truly matters in this season of life. Now that we've been introduced to Walter, Clara, and Frank, let's explore the first 4 insights that Walter shared by the lake that morning. These aren't just abstract concepts, they're practical wisdom that can transform how we experience our mature years. The first principle Walter mentioned is that an intelligent person never pretends they're fine when they're not. This might seem simple on the surface, but it runs counter to what many of us were taught growing up. For decades, you may have been the rock of your family, the reliable one who kept it all together. You showed strength during difficult times, put on a brave face during loss, and pushed through challenges without burdening others with your struggles. While this stoicism might have served a purpose in your younger years, especially when raising children or building a career, it exacts a heavy toll in our later years. When we consistently mask our true feelings, we don't just hide them from others, we begin to lose touch with them ourselves. This emotional disconnection can lead to isolation exactly when we need connection most. Consider what happened with Walter after he lost his brother. By maintaining the appearance that everything was fine, he wasn't protecting his family and friends as he thought. He was actually building barriers that prevented authentic connection. True strength isn't found in hiding our struggles, but in having the courage to acknowledge them. This doesn't mean you need to share every difficulty with everyone you meet. Emotional authenticity isn't about oversharing or constant vulnerability. It's about being honest first with yourself about what you're experiencing and then selectively sharing with those you trust. It's about removing the mask when the weight of wearing it becomes greater than the discomfort of taking it off. What might this look like in practice? It could be as simple as answering, "Actually, I'm having a difficult day," when a close friend asks how you're doing. It might mean telling your adult children that you're feeling lonely since your spouse passed, rather than always assuring them you're managing perfectly well. Or it could mean acknowledging to yourself that retirement isn't quite what you expected, and that's okay. When Frank admitted he was struggling with his identity after retirement, something shifted in the conversation by the lake. His honesty created space for genuine connection and growth. That's what authenticity does. It transforms isolation into possibility. The second principle is equally important. An intelligent person never dismisses the young too quickly. As we age, it's natural to place high value on the wisdom we've accumulated through decades of experience. We've navigated careers, raised families, weathered financial storms, and survived personal losses. This wealth of experience is invaluable, but it can sometimes lead us to dismiss insights from younger generations. Walter's story about his young physical therapist highlights an essential truth. Wisdom isn't the exclusive domain of age. Every generation brings unique perspectives shaped by different historical, technological, and cultural contexts. When we automatically dismiss these perspectives because they come from someone younger, we close ourselves off from fresh insights and new possibilities. Think about how rapidly our world has changed in recent decades. Technology that didn't exist when many of us were building our careers now shapes nearly every aspect of daily life. Medical knowledge and treatments have evolved dramatically. Social norms and communication styles have transformed. Younger people have navigated these changes as natives, not immigrants to a new world. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel if you like this kind of content. Now, back to where we were. This doesn't mean uncritically accepting every new idea or abandoning your own hard-won wisdom. It means approaching intergenerational exchanges with curiosity rather than automatic skepticism. It means recognizing that respect should flow in both directions, not just from young to old. In practical terms, this might mean asking your grandchildren to explain new technologies rather than dismissing them as unnecessary complications. It could mean listening to a younger doctor's treatment recommendations with an open mind, even if they differ from what you've always known. Or it might mean valuing the input of younger colleagues if you're still in the workplace or involved in volunteer organizations. Walter's willingness to learn from his young physical therapist didn't diminish his own wisdom, it enhanced it. By integrating her knowledge with his own experience, he found a better path forward. That's the power of intergenerational respect and learning. The third principle Clara shared is profound in its simplicity. An intelligent person never holds grudges that weigh down the heart. Few things consume more emotional energy in our later years than unresolved resentments and long-held grudges. Whether they involve family members, former colleagues, neighbors, or friends, these emotional burdens take up residence in our minds and hearts, demanding constant attention and maintenance. Clara's story about her neighbor Elaine illustrates how easy it is to let small irritations grow into significant barriers. A minor disagreement about property lines, something that, in the grand scheme of life, means very little, became a source of ongoing negativity in Clara's daily life. Each time she saw her neighbor, the irritation would resurface, refreshing the negative emotions and reinforcing the pattern. What Clara discovered when she finally helped Elaine with her groceries is something many of us learn too late. Holding a grudge hurts us far more than it impacts the other person. While Elaine may have occasionally noticed Clara's coldness, she wasn't carrying the daily burden of resentment. Clara was the one paying the price for maintaining the grudge. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. It's not about condoning harmful actions or pretending hurt didn't occur. It's not even necessarily about reconciliation in all cases. At its core, forgiveness is an act of self-liberation, a conscious decision to stop letting past hurts control your present experience. This becomes increasingly important as we age. With decades of living comes a collection of relationships and interactions, some wonderful, some difficult, some that have left deep wounds. If we carry every hurt, every slight, every disappointment into our later years, the accumulated weight becomes unbearable. Practicing forgiveness might mean reaching out to heal a long-standing family rift, as Clara did with Elaine. But it can also be a private act of releasing resentment towards someone who may no longer be in your life, or even someone who has passed away. It might involve forgiving yourself for past mistakes or choices you now regret. When Clara described forgiveness as dropping a stone I'd been carrying without knowing it, she captured the physical sensation of relief that comes with letting go. That lightness is available to all of us when we choose to release grudges that no longer serve any purpose except to keep us tethered to past pain. The fourth principle Walter shared speaks to something many mature adults struggle with. An intelligent person never neglects their health out of habit or fear. This isn't about pursuing eternal youth or denying the natural changes that come with aging. It's about treating your body with the respect and care it deserves after carrying you through decades of life. When Frank admitted to postponing his checkup, he was acknowledging a common pattern. Many of us develop an adversarial relationship with our bodies as we age. We become frustrated by new limitations, worried about potential diagnoses, or simply habituated to ignoring subtle changes until they become impossible to overlook. Walter's perspective shifts this dynamic entirely. Instead of viewing health maintenance as a burdensome obligation or a reminder of aging, he frames it as an act of gratitude. Your body has allowed you to experience all the joys and challenges of your life, to work, to love, to travel, to embrace your children and grandchildren. It deserves your attention and care, not your neglect or resentment. This principle extends beyond regular medical checkups, though those are certainly important. It encompasses daily choices about nutrition, movement, sleep, and stress management. It's about finding types of physical activity that bring you joy rather than punishment, approaches to eating that nourish rather than restrict, and ways to rest that truly rejuvenate your body and mind. Fear often underlies health neglect as we age. Fear of bad news, fear of being seen as declining, fear of losing independence. But as Walter suggested, avoiding health concerns doesn't prevent problems. It simply delays addressing them until they've often grown more serious. Courage in facing health realities typically leads to better outcomes and, paradoxically, greater independence in the long run. This doesn't mean becoming obsessed with every bodily change or potential health concern. It means striking a balance, paying appropriate attention to your health without allowing it to dominate your thoughts or define your identity. It means working with healthcare providers as partners in your well-being rather than avoiding them or surrendering all agency to them. Frank's slight hand tremor, which he'd been ignoring, represents those small signals our bodies send that deserve attention rather than denial. By acknowledging these signals early, we often have more options for managing them effectively. This proactive approach to health is an act of self-respect that becomes increasingly important with each passing year. These first four principles that Walter and Clara shared with Frank by the lake that morning offer a foundation for living with greater wisdom and peace as we age. They invite us to practice emotional authenticity, to remain open to learning across generations, to release the burden of grudges, and to honor our health as an act of gratitude. What unites these principles is a fundamental shift in perspective, from resistance to acceptance, from rigidity to flexibility, from fear to trust. This doesn't mean passive resignation to whatever comes our way. Rather, it's an active embrace of life as it is, not as we wish it would be or think it should be. As Frank sat on that bench listening to his friends, he began to recognize patterns in his own life that were preventing him from fully embracing this new chapter. His habit of presenting a stoic face rather than admitting his difficulties with retirement. His quick dismissal of his route replacements methods. The lingering resentments he carried from workplace conflicts years ago. His reluctance to address emerging health concerns. In recognizing these patterns, Frank took the first step toward changing them. Awareness precedes transformation, and while change at any age requires courage, the rewards of these shifts in approach become more immediate and more profound in our mature years. The beauty of these principles is that they don't require extraordinary resources, special training, or dramatic life changes to implement. They simply ask us to pay attention to our habitual responses and make conscious choices about whether those habits still serve us well. When Walter talked about pretending to be fine when he wasn't suggesting that Frank needed to dramatically change his personality or suddenly become someone who shares every feeling. He was inviting Frank to notice when the gap between his outer presentation and inner experience becomes too wide, and to bridge that gap with those he trusts. When Clara described letting go of her grudge against her neighbor, she wasn't diminishing the legitimacy of her initial feelings. She was simply acknowledging that continuing to carry those feelings no longer made sense when weighed against the potential for connection and peace. These principles aren't about sweeping transformation, they're about thoughtful adjustments that align our daily choices more closely with what truly matters in this stage of life. They're about recognizing what we can safely set down to make room for what deserves to be picked up. Now let's explore the final 4 insights that emerged from that lakeside conversation between Walter, Clara, and Frank. These principles, when applied consistently, can transform our experience of aging from one of loss and limitation to one of deepening wisdom and unexpected freedom. The 5th principle Clara shared touches on something many of us struggle with throughout our lives, but which becomes especially important in our mature years. An intelligent person never says yes just to avoid discomfort. This wisdom is particularly relevant for those who have spent decades prioritizing others' needs before their own. Clara's experience after losing her husband Robert is one many can relate to. In her grief, she filled every moment with activity and obligation, saying yes to committees, family requests, and community needs. On the surface, this might have looked like admirable service or healthy engagement. But as Clara discovered, when we consistently override our own needs and limitations out of a sense of obligation or discomfort with saying no, we create a life that may look full from the outside but feels hollow from within. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential for sustainable giving. When Clara described boundaries as a form of kindness, first to yourself, then to everyone else, she captured an important truth. We cannot genuinely serve others from a place of depletion. The quality of what we give, our time, attention, energy, or support, inevitably diminishes when we're operating from an empty reserve. This principle becomes increasingly vital as we age. Our energy may not be as abundant as it once was. Recovery from busy periods might take longer. The constant push to exceed our limits can have more serious consequences for our health and well-being. Learning to say no with grace and without. Extensive justification is a skill worth developing at any age, but especially in our mature years. This doesn't mean withdrawing from meaningful involvement or declining every request for your time and attention. It means becoming more selective, more intentional about where you direct your precious resources. It means recognizing that no can be a complete sentence, that explanations are often unnecessary, and that most reasonable people will respect clearly stated boundaries. In practice, this might look like declining a request to chair a committee while still participating as a member. It might mean limiting visits with grandchildren to durations that leave you energized rather than exhausted. Or it could involve being honest about your preferences for how holidays are celebrated, rather than silently accommodating traditions that no longer work for you. For Frank, who nodded in recognition as Clara spoke, this principle might mean acknowledging his need for quiet time as he adjusts to retirement, rather than filling every day with activities to prove he's doing retirement right. It might mean having the courage to tell his wife when social engagements feel overwhelming, rather than pushing through discomfort to avoid disappointing her. When we release the habit of automatic agreement, we create space for more meaningful yes responses, commitments made not out of obligation but genuine desire and capacity. This is how we preserve our energy for what truly matters in this stage of life. The sixth principle Walter shared addresses something that can cast a shadow over our later years if we let it. An intelligent person never dwells on regrets they cannot change. As Frank admitted to replaying missed opportunities and unspoken words in his mind, he gave voice to a challenge many face as they age, the tendency to revisit past choices with the wisdom of hindsight. Before we continue, what's one unspoken lesson you've learned after turning 60? We'd love to read it. Back to where we were. It's natural, as we accumulate decades of life experience, to look back and see moments where a different choice might have led to a better outcome. The career path not taken, the relationship that ended poorly, the parenting, decisions we'd make differently now, the risks we didn't take, the words we left unsaid to those no longer with us. Walter's response to Frank's admission was both compassionate and clear. The past doesn't deserve your present. Guilt is only useful if it teaches, not if it chains you. This distinction is crucial. Reflection on the past can be valuable when it yields insights that inform our present choices. But when rumination becomes a habitual loop that generates ongoing shame, guilt, or regret without producing new understanding, it robs us of our present experience. This principle doesn't ask us to deny mistakes or pretend past actions didn't have consequences. It simply invites us to distinguish between productive reflection and unproductive rumination. The former leads to growth, learning, and occasionally opportunities for amends or repair. The latter keeps us tethered to moments we cannot revisit, distracting us from the life available to us now. For Frank, this might mean acknowledging regrets about moments he missed with his children when they were young, perhaps even expressing those regrets to his now adult children if appropriate, but then consciously choosing to focus on the relationship he can build with them today. It might mean recognizing that the rough patch with Olivia 20 years ago shaped their growth as a couple, and that the past doesn't need to be perfect for the present to be good. Learning to release regret isn't a single decision, but a practice, a moment-by-moment choice to redirect attention from what cannot be changed to what can still be created. It's about recognizing that while we cannot rewrite our past, we retain the power to author our present and future chapters with greater wisdom. The seventh principle Walter shared speaks to a tendency that can significantly limit our experience. As we age, an intelligent person never avoids new experiences out of fear. Frank's hesitation about the painting class his wife suggested reveals a common assumption that our capacity for growth, learning, and new skills diminishes with age. This belief, while understandable, isn't supported by what we now know about the brain's lifelong capacity for adaptation and learning. While certain cognitive processes may change with age, the brain's neuroplasticity, its ability to form new neural connections and adapt to new information, continues throughout our lives. What often holds us back isn't biological limitation, but accumulated fear of judgment, discomfort with being a beginner, or attachment to established self-image. When Frank said, "I think I've been scared to try new things," like that part of life is over, he expressed a narrative many adopt as they age. We build identities around what we've always done and who we've always been. We become invested in competence, in knowing rather than learning. The vulnerability of beginning something new, of potentially doing it poorly at first, can feel increasingly uncomfortable with each passing decade. Walter's response challenges this limiting perspective. Life doesn't stop offering just because you stopped asking. Every day still has something to teach if you're still willing to listen. This view frames aging not as a gradual narrowing of possibilities, but as an ongoing opportunity for discovery and growth. Embracing new experiences doesn't mean you need to start skydiving or learn quantum physics. It might be as simple as trying a new cuisine, exploring a different genre of books, learning a basic musical instrument, or yes, taking a beginning painting class with no expectation of mastery. The value isn't in achievement, but in the process itself, in remaining open to discovery, maintaining curiosity, and experiencing the unique joy that comes from learning something new. For Frank, saying yes to that painting class with Olivia might open a door, not just to potential artistic expression, but to a shared experience of beginning something together. It might create new conversation, new shared references, new appreciation for each other's perspectives. The quality of the paintings produced would be entirely secondary to these relational benefits. This principle invites us to question the stories we tell ourselves about what's appropriate or possible at our age. It challenges us to distinguish between genuine limitations and self-imposed restrictions based on fear or outdated cultural narratives about aging. Most importantly, it reminds us that growth doesn't have an expiration date. The eighth and final principle Walter shared contains perhaps the most profound wisdom of all. An intelligent person never tries to control what's meant to be let go. This touches the heart of what it means to age with grace rather than resistance, to recognize that some forms of control that served us well in earlier years may now be standing between us and peace. Walter's admission about his own journey is revealing. "I spent years thinking I could fix everything, manage outcomes, plan the pain away. But peace only came when I stopped gripping so tight." Many of us, particularly those who have navigated successful careers and raised families, have developed a strong sense of agency and responsibility. We've learned that effort, planning, and determination can solve many problems and create desired outcomes. While this approach serves us well in many contexts, it has limitations, especially when faced with the inevitable changes and losses that come with aging. We cannot control the passage of time, the natural changes in our bodies, the choices of adult children, or many of the circumstances of our later years. When we expend our limited energy trying to control what cannot be controlled, we create unnecessary suffering for ourselves and often for those around us. This doesn't mean surrendering to passive resignation or abandoning appropriate responsibility for what we can influence. It means developing the wisdom to distinguish between what can be changed through effort and what can only be accepted with grace. It means recognizing that sometimes the path to peace lies not in tightening our grip, but in opening our hands. Walter's metaphor is particularly apt. Life isn't a problem to be solved, it's a tide to be trusted. Tides have their own rhythm and timing. They cannot be hurried or delayed by our wishes, but when we learn to work with them rather than against them, we discover a different kind of freedom. For Frank, sitting on that bench with his morning coffee, this principle might mean accepting that retirement will have its own rhythm, different from the structured days of his male route. It might mean releasing the need to have this transition all figured out, allowing himself to exist in the uncertainty of this new chapter without rushing to fill it with replacements for what was lost. This principle of letting go extends to many aspects of aging, releasing outdated self-images, accepting changing family dynamics, adapting to new physical limitations, and ultimately coming to terms with mortality itself. In each case, peace comes not from denial or control, but from a willing surrender to what is, coupled with conscious choice about how we respond. These 8 principles that Walter and Clara shared with Frank that morning by the lake offer no guarantees against the challenges of aging. They don't promise freedom from loss, limitation, or difficult transitions. What they offer instead is a framework for responding to these inevitable experiences in ways that create space for continued growth, deepening wisdom, and unexpected joy. As the morning light strengthened and the 3 friends sat in contemplative silence, something had shifted, not just for Frank, but for all of them. In articulating these principles, Walter and Clara had reminded themselves of truths they needed to hear again. In listening openly, Frank had begun to see possibilities in this new chapter that weren't visible to him before. This is the gift of shared wisdom. It illuminates paths forward, not just for those who receive it, but often for those who offer it as well. When we put words to the understanding we've gained through living, we strengthen our own commitment to these truths. When we listen openly to others' insights, we discover new applications for our own lives. The lake before them had seen countless sunrises and would see countless more. The birds would continue their patterns of coming and going with the seasons. The trees would adapt to changing conditions, bending with winds they couldn't control. In nature's rhythms, there are lessons for human aging, about resilience, adaptation, and the beauty that can emerge from embracing rather than resisting the natural flow of life. The following Thursday found our 3 friends at the same bench, by the lake, but something was different. Frank arrived first, thermos in hand, pouring coffee into cups before the others even arrived. There was an ease to his movements that hadn't been there before, a lightness in his expression that spoke of small but significant shifts. "You're looking well," Clara commented as she settled beside him, accepting the cup he offered with a smile. "Different somehow." Frank nodded, looking out at the water. "I signed up for that painting class with Olivia," he said. "First session was Tuesday. I was terrible." He chuckled, surprising himself with the genuine amusement in his voice. "But you know what? It didn't matter. We laughed the whole drive home." Walter joined them, easing onto the bench with a contented sigh. "And how did it feel to be a beginner again?" "Uncomfortable," Frank admitted, "but also freeing in a way I didn't expect. I've spent so many years being the expert at what I do. There's something liberating about having no expectations to meet." Clara nodded knowingly. "Sometimes we don't realize how heavy the weight of competence can become until we set it down. I also called my doctor," Frank continued, "got that checkup scheduled, and I had a long talk with my son about how this transition has really been, not the sanitized version I've been giving everyone." He flexed his hand, the one with the slight tremor. "He actually thanked me, said he'd been worried because I seemed too perfectly fine." Walter smiled. "It takes courage to show our true faces, but that's where the real connections happen." The 3 sat quietly for a moment, watching a pair of ducks glide across the lake's surface, leaving gentle ripples in their wake. There was something profound in that simple movement, the way each ripple expanded outward, touching places far from its origin. Just as the conversation they'd shared the previous week had created ripples that were now spreading through Frank's daily choices, through his relationships, through his understanding of himself in this new chapter. This is the promise that lies within these 8 principles. Not that they will shield you from the challenges of aging or magically erase the difficulties of life's transitions. But that, applied consistently with patience and self-compassion, they can create ripples of transformation that touch every aspect of your experience. Think about your own life right now. Which of these principles resonates most deeply with your current circumstances? Is it the reminder to be authentic rather than hiding behind a mask of fine when you're struggling? The invitation to remain open to learning from younger generations? The freedom that comes from releasing long-held grudges? The self-respect inherent in tending to your health? Or perhaps it's the courage to set boundaries rather than saying yes out of obligation? The peace that comes from releasing regrets that cannot be changed? The joy available when you remain open to new experiences despite fears of inadequacy? Or the profound wisdom of loosening your grip on what cannot be controlled? You don't need to transform everything at once. Change that lasts rarely happens that way. Instead, consider choosing just one principle to focus on in the coming week. Notice the situations where applying this wisdom might shift your experience. Pay attention to the stories you tell yourself that might be keeping you trapped in patterns that no longer serve you. How might your daily experience change if you allowed yourself to admit when you're struggling rather than maintaining a facade of perfect coping? What connections might deepen? What support might become available that you've been unintentionally blocking? What would it be like to approach your adult children or grandchildren with genuine curiosity about their perspectives rather than automatic certainty in your own? What new understanding might emerge? What mutual respect might grow? If you've been carrying the weight of old resentments or unresolved conflicts, what would it feel like to set down that burden? Not for the other person's sake, but for your own peace. How might that released energy be redirected toward what brings you joy? Are there aspects of your health you've been neglecting out of fear, habit, or a misplaced sense that it doesn't matter at this stage? What small step could you take this week toward treating your body with the care and respect it deserves after carrying you through decades of life? When was the last time you said no to something that didn't align with your energy, values, or priorities? What becomes possible when you reserve your precious time and attention for what truly matters to you? If regrets about past choices have been occupying your thoughts, could you approach them differently? Extracting any valuable lessons they offer, making amends where possible, and then consciously redirecting your attention to what you can still influence. What new experience have you been avoiding out of fear of looking foolish or performing poorly? What unexpected joy or connection might await if you approached it with curiosity rather than expectation? And finally, where have you been expending energy trying to control what cannot be controlled? What peace might become available if you opened your hands and trusted the tide? These questions aren't meant to create pressure or additional obligations. They're invitations to look at familiar patterns with fresh eyes, to consider whether small adjustments might lead to a more peaceful, authentic, and joyful experience of this stage of life. As our three friends by the lake discovered, wisdom isn't just about accumulating knowledge. It's about discerning what to hold on to and what to release. It's about recognizing that some habits that served us well in earlier chapters may now be standing between us and the peace we seek. And it's about having the courage to make changes even after decades of established patterns. Walter summed it up beautifully as they prepared to leave the bench that second Thursday morning. "You know," he said to Frank, "people often talk about aging as if it's all about loss, losing health, losing relevance, losing independence. But I've found it can also be about finding authenticity when you no longer need to impress anyone, finding peace when you release what you can't control, finding deeper connections when you drop the pretenses that younger years seemed to require." Clara nodded, gathering her things. "It's like finally becoming the person you were meant to be all along." Frank looked out at the lake one more time before standing. "I think I'm starting to understand what you mean. The tremor in his hand seemed less pronounced, or perhaps he was simply less concerned by it. Same time next week? They nodded, this weekly ritual now an anchor in all their lives, a space where wisdom could be shared, challenges acknowledged, and small victories celebrated. A reminder that none of us is meant to navigate aging alone, that there is profound power in speaking our truths and listening deeply to others. As you move forward from this conversation we've shared today, remember that you too are not alone in navigating this stage of life. There are others walking similar paths, facing similar challenges, discovering similar truths. Reach out, share your journey, listen to the wisdom others have gained, and most importantly, be gentle with yourself as you implement these principles. Change, even positive change, rarely follows a straight line. There will be days of forgetting, of falling back into old patterns, of wondering if transformation is really possible. On those days, remember that wisdom isn't about perfection. It's about returning to what you know to be true, again and again, with patience and self-compassion. The path of aging with intention is ultimately about choice. Choosing authenticity over pretense, curiosity over certainty, forgiveness over resentment, self-respect over neglect, boundaries over depletion, learning over regret, growth over fear, and acceptance over fruitless control. These choices, made consistently over time, create not just a better experience of aging, but a legacy of wisdom that ripples outward, touching all who encounter it. Just as Walter and Clara's wisdom created new possibilities for Frank, your own journey toward more intentional aging has the power to inspire others. By choosing to live these principles, you become a quiet beacon, showing what's possible in this stage of life. That might be the most meaningful legacy of all. If you found something meaningful in all this, a like would let us know it resonated with you. Also, leave a comment below with your experience on this matter. Your story could help someone else going through the same situation. Thanks for watching.